There's a city in the ancient world so wild that people turned its name into a verb. To Corinthianize literally meant throw out every rule and live however you want. Now, picture a church inside that exact city doing something so twisted that even the sinners outside were disgusted by it. And here's the part that should stop you cold. The church wasn't ashamed. They were proud of it. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to see something in your own life you didn't expect to see. This is 1 Corinthians 5 and 6, and it gets uncomfortable fast, in the best way. Paul's in Ephesus when a report crosses the sea, not rumor, eyewitness testimony. And it's not about something happening out in the streets of Corinth, where honestly, anything went. It's happening inside the church, in the room where they broke bread and prayed together. A man in the church is sleeping with his stepmother. Not a one-time slip, an ongoing public arrangement everybody in the church already knew about. And Paul says something wild. This kind of thing wasn't even tolerated among the pagans. Let that sink in. The most permissive city in the empire had a line, and this church stepped over it. But here's what actually broke Paul's heart. It wasn't the sin, it was the reaction. The church wasn't grieving, they were bragging. They'd turned the scandal into proof of how open-minded, how accepting, how free they'd become. A church that felt guilty about this would actually be in better shape. Guilt means your conscience is still awake. This church had gone past guilt. The wrong thing had started to feel right. And a church, or a person, proud of the thing they should be mourning, that's genuinely hard to help. You can't fix what you're celebrating. Here's how this actually happens. And it's happening to all of us right now, whether you notice it or not. Everything you watch, everything you scroll, everything you're around, it doesn't just pass through you. It settles. You're a sponge. And whatever you're soaking in is what comes out when life squeezes you. And if that made you a little uncomfortable, good. Keep that feeling, because we're going to come back to it at the end, and it's going to hit different. Quick ask. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, hit subscribe now so you don't miss where this goes, because next part is where Paul drops the hammer. Paul's response sounds brutal on the surface. Remove the man, hand him over to Satan, don't even eat a meal with him. Modern ears hear that and think cancel culture ancient edition. But there's one word that changes everything about how to read this: restoration. This wasn't the church playing judge over a man's soul. It's the church refusing to keep pretending. Hand him to Satan means stop shielding him from the consequences of the life he's already chosen. Think of a parent finally stepping back and letting a stubborn adult kid hit the wall they've been running toward, because sometimes the collision is the only thing that wakes someone up. And here's the part that should give you chills. Later, in Paul's second letter to this same church, he talks about a man who was disciplined, who genuinely repented, and who was now in danger of drowning in sorrow. Paul tells the church, forgive him, comfort him, bring him home. Most scholars think it's the same guy, kicked out in letter 1, welcomed home in letter 2. Now Paul zooms out, and this next part might sting more than the first one, because it's not about a scandal anymore. It's about something way more common. The church was suing each other, in public, in front of judges who didn't even share their faith, airing their dirty laundry in the town square. And then Paul does something most of us wouldn't do. He lists sexual sin right next to greed, swindling, and being mean with your words. Same list, same weight. We build hierarchies. We put the sins we don't struggle with on a high shelf marked serious, and we quietly hide the ones we do struggle with where nobody can call us out. Paul flattens the whole shelf. But right after that brutal list, Paul writes one sentence that changes the color of everything. Such were some of you, but you were washed. If every sin gets the same weight, that means every sin also gets the same rescue. Nobody's sin is too respectable to need it, and nobody's is too scandalous to be reached by it. There was a phrase going around Corinth: I'm free so I can do whatever I want with my body. Sound familiar? It's basically 2026 in one sentence. And Paul is about to dismantle that idea so completely, it's going to change how you see your own body by the end of this video. First, Paul reminds them,
You were washed, past tense. Something happened to you. You're not who you used to be, so why are you still living like the old tenant runs the place? Second, your body isn't a private possession anymore. You're joined to Christ, which means what you do with your body isn't just your business. It's connected to something holy. And here's the truth that should stop you in your tracks. Paul says your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit, but in the Greek, there were two different words for temple. One meant the whole temple complex, courtyards, walls, the crowds coming and going. Paul doesn't use that word. He uses the other one, the word for the inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, the one room in the entire building where the high priest could enter once a year, where the presence of God actually lived. Feel that collision. The world says your body is just an appetite machine. Do whatever feels good. Paul says your body is the holiest room in the universe because God moved in. You don't drag the Holy of Holies through the mud. If that line just hit you, drop a comment with one word, sanctuary, so I know it landed. And if you want more breakdowns like this, the subscribe button's right there. Now, here's the part that answers the question, so what do I actually do with this?
Corinth was a city full of slaves and former slaves. Everyone knew what it meant to be bought. Money changes hands, ownership transfers. So when Paul says you were bought with a price, he's using the slave market word on purpose. You changed hands. We've been trained to think owning yourself is the highest goal there is, but nobody actually owns themselves. Everybody serves something. Your appetites, the fear of missing out, the need for people to like you, the endless hunger to prove you've made it. The question was never if you'd be owned, only which master. Remember the leaven from earlier? Paul already told us the price back at the start, and we're circling back to it now. Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. That's the price. Not silver, not gold, blood. There's one moment in the Bible that shows you what this looks like when it walks on two legs. Joseph, a slave, alone in a foreign house. His master's wife grabs him, pressures him day after day, and Joseph doesn't negotiate. He doesn't weigh his options. He runs, leaves his coat in her hand, and gets out. Why? Listen to what he says. How could I sin against God? Not against a rule, against God. Corinth isn't as far away as it looks. The pull that got inside that church is working on you right now. It doesn't come at you head on. It seeps in through your feed, your habits. What you've decided is no big deal. And the most dangerous version isn't the sin you feel guilty about. It's the one you've started to feel proud of. This isn't about shame. It's the opposite. You are a sanctuary. The living God moved into the holiest room in the universe, and that room is you. You were never cheap. You were bought at the highest price ever paid. And once that actually lands, you stop asking, how much can I get away with? And start asking, how do I honor the one who lives in me? If this opened something up for you, tell me in the comments what hit you hardest. I read every one. Send this to someone who needs to hear they're worth more than the world's told them. And subscribe if you haven't, so you're here for the next one, because next week gets even harder to ignore.